Some stories begin with joy. Mine began with fear dressed as obedience and silence taught as holiness. What I am about to share looks ordinary from the outside, but inside it was a quiet storm that almost swallowed me. Stay with me, because what started as a normal life slowly became a test of survival. As you read, you may feel uncomfortable, curious, or deeply moved. That is good. It means the story is alive. Before you continue, please comment where you are watching or reading from, so we can connect as one family and continue to pray for one another across nations and borders. I was born into Islam, not by choice, but by inheritance. Faith was the first thing handed to me before I could walk, speak, or ask questions. My earliest memories were filled with routine, rules, and reminders. I learned early that obedience meant safety, and silence meant survival. Every morning began with strict order. The house smelled of incense and seriousness. My body learned movements before my heart understood meaning. Prayer was not just worship, it was inspection. Mistakes were not corrected gently, they were noticed, remembered, and sometimes punished. Fear became a teacher long before love ever tried. I grew up learning what was allowed and what was forbidden. Clothes were not chosen for comfort, but for control. My body was treated like a danger that needed to be hidden. I was taught that a good girl did not laugh loudly, did not question deeply, and did not dream freely. Honor was heavy, and it rested mostly on girls. At school, I memorized verses I barely understood. Teachers revealed to me that questioning was a sign of weak faith. Elders showed me that doubt was shameful. I learned to nod even when my heart felt confused. Inside me, curiosity slowly turned into guilt. Guilt then turned into fear. My family was respected in our community. From the outside, we looked disciplined and blessed. Inside, love was often conditional. Approval depended on how well I followed rules. When I failed, disappointment filled the room like thick smoke. No one needed to shout. Silence itself was enough to wound. As I grew older, the pressure increased. I was constantly reminded of consequences. People around me described punishment, not only from family, but from God. Hell was explained in vivid detail. Mercy was mentioned, but fear was emphasized. My faith became less about devotion and more about escape from punishment. I watched other girls suffer quietly. Some were forced into decisions they did not understand. Some disappeared from school and returned changed, older, and quieter. Adults explained that this was destiny and obedience. No one asked how the girls felt. Feelings were never part of the conversation. The first persecution I experienced was internal. My thoughts became my enemy. When questions came, I fought them. I fasted harder, prayed longer, and tried to silence my mind. Instead of peace, I felt heavier. Instead of clarity, I felt trapped. Then persecution became external. One evening, I showed hesitation during prayer. It was small, almost invisible. Still, it was noticed. I was confronted and reminded of my duty. The correction was not gentle. Hands were raised, not in prayer but in discipline. I learned that faith enforced by pain leaves deep marks on the soul. After that day, I lived carefully. I measured my words. I controlled my face. I trained myself to look faithful. At night, I cried quietly so no one would hear. Tears became my private language. Fear slept beside me like a constant companion. Community gatherings became places of judgment. Women watched each other closely. Any sign of weakness became gossip. I felt surrounded, inspected, and trapped. Love felt conditional. Acceptance felt temporary. One mistake could cost everything. I was reminded repeatedly that leaving Islam was worse than death. People around me described severe consequences faced by those who tried. Stories were shared as warnings. Families disowned children. Friends disappeared. Violence was justified as protection of honor and faith. These stories were meant to scare me, and they worked. I did not yet leave. I did not yet choose another path. But my heart was already tired. I felt alone, even in crowds. I felt unheard even when surrounded by voices. The persecution was not only physical or emotional, it was spiritual suffocation. By the end of that year, I realized something painful. I was alive, but I was not free. I believed, but I did not feel loved. I obeyed, but I did not feel known. Something inside me whispered that life should be more than fear. That whisper was quiet, but it refused to die. And that was how my story truly began. Some pain does not scream. It whispers every day until the heart becomes tired of pretending. What happened next did not begin with rebellion, but with simple questions that refused to die. If you stay with me, you will understand how curiosity became a crime and how thinking became dangerous. I did not wake up one day wanting to change my faith. That is not how it happened. What changed me were small moments that slowly grew heavy. They followed me into prayer, into sleep, and into silence. I tried to push them away, but they returned stronger each time. At first, the questions were quiet. They came when I watched people suffer and still be blamed. They came when I saw fear used as a tool. They came when rules mattered more than mercy. I wondered why love felt so far away when faith was supposed to bring peace. I never asked these questions out loud. I learned early that asking was dangerous. Elders around me revealed that doubt was a disease. Teachers showed me that thinking too deeply could destroy a person. I understood that safety came from agreement, not understanding. Still, my heart kept asking. I noticed how different people were treated. Men were forgiven easily. Women were watched closely. Mistakes by girls were remembered longer. I saw how shame was used to control us. I felt it pressing on my chest every day. One day, I failed to hide my confusion. My face showed it. Someone close to me noticed and warned me. That person explained that such thoughts could bring punishment, not only from people but from God. Fear entered me again, stronger than before. From that moment, persecution became personal. I was watched more closely. My actions were checked. My prayers were measured. My movements were questioned. It felt like living under a bright light that never turned off. I could not relax. I could not breathe freely. At home, tension filled the air. I was reminded of family honor. I was reminded of consequences. I was reminded of stories where people who doubted were beaten, locked away, or abandoned. These stories were shared to break my courage. I began to feel alone. At night, I cried silently. I pressed my face into my pillow so no one would hear. My heart felt heavy with fear and confusion. I asked myself why searching for truth felt like a crime. I wondered why my soul felt unsafe in the place it was born. The pressure did not stop. It increased. One afternoon I hesitated again during a religious routine. It was small, but it was noticed. I was confronted and corrected harshly. Hands were used to teach obedience. Pain was explained as love. Discipline was explained as care. My body learned what my mouth could not say. That day changed me. I learned that questioning could cost safety. I learned that silence was required for survival. I learned that my thoughts could make me an enemy in my own home. Fear settled deep inside me, like something permanent. Outside the house, the community felt just as dangerous. People talked, eyes followed, smiles felt fake. I felt trapped in a cage made of rules and expectations. Approval depended on how well I followed rules. When I failed, disappointment filled the room like thick smoke. No one needed to shout. Silence itself was enough to wound. As I grew older, the pressure increased. I was constantly reminded of consequences. People around me described punishment, not only from family, but from God. Hell was explained in vivid detail. Mercy was mentioned, but fear was emphasized. My faith became less about devotion and more about escape from punishment. I watched other girls suffer quietly. Some were forced into decisions they did not understand. Some disappeared from school and returned changed, older, and quieter. Adults explained that this was destiny and obedience. No one asked how the girls felt. Feelings were never part of the conversation. The first persecution I experienced was internal. My thoughts became my enemy. When questions came, I fought them. I fasted harder, prayed longer, and tried to silence my mind. Instead of peace, I felt heavier. Instead of clarity, I felt trapped. Then persecution became external. One evening, I showed hesitation during prayer. It was small, almost invisible. Still, it was noticed. I was confronted and reminded of my duty. The correction was not gentle. Hands were raised, not in prayer but in discipline. I learned that faith enforced by pain leaves deep marks on the soul. After that day, I lived carefully. I measured my words. I controlled my face. I trained myself to look faithful. At night, I cried quietly so no one would hear. Tears became my private language. Fear slept beside me like a constant companion. Community gatherings became places of judgment. Women watched each other closely. Any sign of weakness became gossip. I felt surrounded, inspected, and trapped. Love felt conditional. Acceptance felt temporary. One mistake could cost everything. I was warned all my life about people like this. I was taught that listening was dangerous. I was taught that even hearing could corrupt the soul. Still, something felt different. The peace I saw in that person did not look fake. It did not look forced. I listened quietly. I learned about Jesus through small explanations. I was shown stories of love, forgiveness, and sacrifice. I was taught that God could be close, not distant. Gentle, not cruel. Loving, not threatening. These ideas felt strange, almost illegal inside my heart. For the first time, faith did not feel heavy. I felt drawn, but also terrified. I knew the cost. I knew what happened to people who crossed this line. I had heard stories of beatings, rejection, and isolation. I knew families who treated converts as dead. Fear wrapped around me tightly. Still, the pull grew stronger. I began to notice a change inside me. I felt peace in moments where I used to feel panic. I felt hope during nights that were once full of tears. I felt seen even when I was alone. It felt like someone understood me without demanding perfection. That scared me even more. I tried to resist. I avoided contact. I forced myself back into routine. But the contrast was too clear. Fear on one side, peace on the other, control on one side, love on the other. Eventually, someone close to me noticed my change. My silence was questioned. My joy was suspicious. My calm was unsettling. I was confronted again. This time, the warning was stronger. I was reminded of shame. I was reminded of punishment. I was reminded of what I could lose. From that day, persecution intensified. My movements were restricted. My phone was checked. My friendships were monitored. Privacy disappeared. Trust vanished. I felt like a prisoner under constant watch. Even breathing felt risky. I was accused of betrayal without saying a word. One night, my belongings were searched. Something was found that connected me to Christian teaching. Chaos followed. I was surrounded. I was threatened. I was told that my thoughts had brought disgrace. Fear flooded my body. My heart raced. My hands shook. I was isolated. For days I was kept away from others. Meals were reduced. Words were sharp. Faces were cold. Love was withdrawn as punishment. I felt stripped of identity, reduced to shame. In that darkness, something unexpected happened. I did not feel alone. Even when everyone turned away, peace stayed with me. Strength I did not recognize carried me. Fear knocked loudly, but hope refused to leave. I felt held in a way I had never known before. I realized then that this was not just curiosity anymore. This was faith being born in pain. I did not yet speak openly. I did not yet declare anything. But in my heart, a decision was forming. Quietly, carefully, courageously. I knew choosing Jesus would cost me everything. And somehow, for the first time in my life, that cost felt worth it. That was the moment persecution stopped being my fear and started becoming my testimony. Some endings feel like death before they feel like life. What I am about to share is the part many people avoid, the cost, the pain, and the loneliness that followed my decision. Stay with me, because this chapter carries wounds, but it also carries hope. I did not announce my decision. I did not make a public declaration. My choice was quiet, made deep inside my heart. I chose Jesus knowing very well what it could cost me. I chose him knowing I might lose my family, my safety, and my place in the world I knew. Not long after, everything changed. The people closest to me sensed it. They did not need words. My peace exposed me. My courage frightened them. I was confronted again, this time with anger instead of warnings. I was accused of betrayal. I was treated like a stranger in my own home. Persecution became open and cruel. I was shouted at. I was insulted. I was called names meant to break my spirit. People explained that I had brought shame. They showed me how disappointment could feel heavier than violence. Love was replaced with rejection. One night, I was pushed out of my room. I slept on the floor, cold and shaking. Hunger followed. Days passed where food was used as punishment. Silence became a weapon. No one spoke to me unless it was to correct or condemn. I was watched constantly. My movements were controlled. My phone was taken. My freedom disappeared. I was no longer trusted to think for myself. I felt like a prisoner, not for a crime, but for believing differently. The emotional pain was worse than the physical. Being rejected by strangers hurts. Being rejected by family breaks something deep inside. I felt invisible. I felt unwanted. I felt like my existence had become a problem that needed to be erased. There were moments I thought about giving up. I remember sitting alone, knees pulled to my chest, tears falling without sound. Fear told me to return, to pretend, to survive. But something stronger held me. Even in pain, I felt peace. Even in rejection, I felt loved. That love kept me alive. Eventually, the pressure grew too dangerous. Threats became serious. I was warned of what could happen if I did not change. I understood that staying could cost me my life. Leaving meant losing everything I knew. I left with nothing, no money, no plan, no protection. Just faith and fear walking side by side. Nights were long, hunger returned, loneliness became my shadow. Still, I felt free for the first time. I faced insults from my community. I faced isolation. I faced danger. But I also found kindness. Strangers helped me. Believers supported me. I learned that family can be built by love, not blood. My life did not become easy. Following Jesus did not remove pain. It gave me strength to endure it. It gave me hope when everything else was taken. My scars remain, but they tell a story of survival. Today, I share this testimony for those still hiding, still afraid, still hurting. I want you to know that you are not alone. Your pain is seen. Your faith matters. To Christians across the world, I ask you to pray. Pray for those who are persecuted for their faith. Pray for those who have lost homes, families, and safety because they chose Christ. Pray for strength, protection, and courage for believers in dangerous places. And to anyone reading this who feels the call to turn away from sin and turn toward Jesus, I gently encourage you now. In your heart, speak to God. Acknowledge your need for Him. Believe that Jesus gave His life for you and rose again. Ask Him to forgive you, to lead you, and to make you new. Commit your life to Him, not in fear, but in trust. This decision may not make life easy, but it will make it true. My name was changed, my past was painful, my future is in Christ. And no amount of persecution can take that away.